So when we left off the last video, what we had was a working program using Pygame that had a moving block on it. So we just started animation. And I'll go ahead and I'll run the program again just to refresh your memory. Here I've got this nice white block and I've set it up so it's only moving to the right. And eventually it's going to go off the screen, and when it does, it's just going to keep moving to the right, and we can't see it anymore because our window isn't there. And that means we can't see what's going on with that block anymore. We can't really access it. So we've got a good start, but we're going to take it a step further today. And what we're going to do is we are going to loop the block, so once it goes off of the side of the screen, it's going to come back around on the other side. Okay, so here is my block, and you can see I'm drawing the block at x, y, and I set up the variables x and y to start out at 50 each. So what that means is, if I open up Paint here, 50 over and 50 down will be the top left corner of the block. And then the next thing that it shows is this 50-50 right here, and that means that our block goes 50 over from that point and 50 down from that point. And so if you go 50 down in both directions and 50 over in both directions like that, then you end up with this box. So in other words, it's 50 wide and 50 high, with the top left corner being at 50, 50. Okay, and then all I'm doing in this program, the process that I'm doing is I'm saying x is x plus 1. And I'm going to just change that to x plus equals 1, and it's going to do the same thing. Just like we talked about that before, right? X is moving 1 over every time we go through this loop. And this loop is happening 60 times in a second. Now, once we move our block enough, so it moves over 1 and then over 1 and then over 1 and over 1, and it keeps moving and moving and moving where we're drawing our block, eventually the block gets to here, and then it gets to here, and then it gets to here, and it's off the screen, and we can't see what's happening with it anymore, right? So what we want to do is we want to say, all right, when the block gets to this side of the screen, let's set it right back over to here. So it looks like as the block goes across and it goes off the screen here, it comes right back on this side, and it looks like kind of one of those never-ending portals, right? Where if you go through here, you'll come out here. So what we need to do is we need to process a little bit more, right? Move the block over 1. Now we have to say if the block, and I'm just going to type this as words for a moment. If the block is past the right side of the screen, then what we want to do is we want to send it back to the left side. Right? That's what we want to do. So if the block is past the right side, well, how do we figure out where the block is? It's this x right here. So we can say if x is equal to, well, how wide is my window? My window is 800 by 600. So something I could do right here is I could say width equals 800, height equals 600, and then I could put width here, and I could put height here, and then I could just say if x equals the width, so if x gets to the width of my window, then what do we want to do? We want to send it back to the left-hand side. So then we need to reset x back to 0. Remember, 0 is the left-hand side of the window. So let's run it and see what happens. Oh, invalid syntax. Aha! I forgot my double equals. If x equals the width, it's trying to set it. So if x is actually equal to the width, let's run it now. So here goes my box. It's going across the right-hand side of the screen. It's going kind of slow, but just bear with me here. Let's see if it comes back on the left-hand side. And you can see that it did. Even though, hopefully you noticed, as it went off this side, the whole box appeared right here. So if you're watching closely over on this side, the whole box is going to suddenly appear. Okay, and the reason that it's doing that is we're setting x back equal to 0. Now remember that x is the top left corner of the box. This is where x is, saying how far over we're drawing it. And since we say 0, it means the top left corner of the box is right here at 0. So our box is drawn right here right away. What we want to do is we want to set it to right here so the box is drawn more like this. So it's still off the screen. Since our box is 50 wide, we don't want to send our box back to 0. We want to send it back to 0, but subtract off the width of the box. And in this case, that's 50. Our box is 50 wide. So if we run it one more time, as the block comes off of the edge of the screen, as soon as it totally disappears, it will start reappearing on this side, and rather than the whole block just appearing suddenly. And it'll look more natural. Right? It looks like it came off and then came back on here. What happens if our block was moving to the left? So let's move it to the left this time. You can see our block goes off the screen and there's nothing to tell it to come back over here, right? So this is where we have to think about the logic a little bit. So we're going to move it to the left. If x is equal to the width, in other words, if it's gone off the right-hand side of the screen, then we're going to set it back to the left-hand side. So we need to say elif if x is equal to, so negative 50, so if it goes off the left-hand side of the screen, then what do we need to do? We need to set it off back to the right-hand side of the screen. Now there's a little bit of an issue here. Let's see if it shows up. So we've gone off the side and it came back on here. Now what could happen is the box could get stuck going back and forth between these two spots. And the reason that could potentially happen is as soon as we hit the right-hand side of the screen, we're setting it back over to the left-hand side. But then the next time through the loop, we're saying, well, if we're on the left-hand side, set it back to the right-hand side. So just so be aware that there's a potential for conflict there. Now another thing that could happen is if we were moving this by 3s, or some number that isn't a factor of the width, then at some point x might not equal the width. So since our width is 600, so we could just as easily say 600 here and 600 here. If we were going 50, then 53, then 56, what if all of a sudden we got up to 598, 601, 604, and we just kept going? Well, x would never actually equal 600, right? So we would probably want to say something like, as soon as it gets past 600, or it's equal to it. Well, that's just one thing to keep in mind. Now, this works just as well. Well, let's just try this out, see what happens. See, our box went off the left because we're moving it over by 3, and it doesn't come back around. But if we say if x is less than or equal to negative 50, let me try that again. It came back around, oh, but then it popped over here. Oh yeah, and that's because our width, of course, is 800, not 600, my mistake. Try that one more time. You can see our box went off the screen and came right back here, even though we're moving it by 3s, and it actually won't matter how fast we're moving it by. If we move it by 12s, it's going to be going a lot faster. But you can see it loops and comes back around, and we don't have to worry about it landing right exactly on the edge anymore. Okay, one other thing that we can change as well is we can say, well, what about going up and down? So let's just move the block up and down now. So I'm going to start by moving the block down. Now we can say if y is equal to the height of our window, and in this case, the height of our window is 600, remember? So we could have a 600 here just as easily. If y reaches the height of the window, which means if the top left corner of our box reaches down to here, which is the height of the window, then what do we want to do? We want to pop this box back up to here. Now we don't want to pop it back up to 0, because if we pop it up at 0, 0 is right here for our height, our box will be drawn like this, and we'll have the same problem we did at the start for the x. We want to draw the box right here so that as we move it down, it looks like it came back on the screen, not that it suddenly appeared on the whole thing on the screen. So if y is equal to the height, then we're going to reset our y back to negative 50. In other words, 50 above the top of the screen, because that's the height of our box. And then we can say elif if y is equal to negative 50. Oh, forgot my double equal sign there. If it's equal to negative 50, then what do we want to do? We want to send it back down to the bottom. So that's if we were going up. So if y is going up, then let's send it back down to the bottom. So y equals height. Let's try that out. So our block is moving down, And then once it gets off the screen, it should start coming around back up here, and you can watch closely to make sure it comes back on in the right way. And that looks nice and smooth. Now we can do both of these at the same time, actually. So if we want them both headed to the right, so it'll be going down and to the right, as soon as it goes off one of the sides, it's going to loop back up. And so here we go, it's going to come down off here, and since it's going to go off the bottom first, it should come back on up here, because we said when y gets to the bottom, reset y to the top. If x gets to the right, reset it to the left. And this will just keep happening like this over and over and over. We'll never lose our block. It's just going to keep looping back around and look like it's flowing through there. Okay, there you go. So I'm resetting my movement to be just sideways now, so I'm not adding anything to my y's anymore. Now if you've ever played the game Portal, what happens is there's a blue and an orange portal, and if you go through one, you come out the other. So I'm going to set up 2 portals in this, and I'm going to say when my block goes through the blue portal, it comes out the orange portal. And technically that won't be what's happening really, but that's what it's going to look like. So I need 2 more rectangles, one that's blue and one that's orange. So pygame.draw.rectangle on the window. I want to draw a blue one. And where do I want to draw this blue one? Let's say I'm going to draw it, well, my window is 800 by 600. So let's say I draw it 700 over, and my block is drawn 50 down. So let's say 30 down, so that it's above, the top of my portal is above the block. And then I'm going to draw my portal to be 60 wide, 60 wide, and how high do I want it to be? Let's say 70 high. And I'm going to have it filled. So let's run it and just take a look at where it is. That looks pretty good. It looks like my block is going to go over to this portal. Now the reason my portal is so big is so that it will totally cover up the block. So the block is behind it at some point, right? You see that there? So I need one more portal here, and I'll say pygame.draw.rectangle on the window. I'm going to make this one orange. And where do I want this? It can be anywhere on the screen. So let's say 70 over and 300 down. And we're going to make this one the same size, so 60 by 70. And it's going to be filled in as well. Oh, and I've got an error. And it's because I misspelled orange. Let's run that again. So here's my block. What I want to do is, as soon as this block gets behind the blue one, pop it back behind the orange one so it looks like it went in here and came out here. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So I want to say if x reaches, now what would this have to be? Well, my blue block is drawn at 730. So if it reaches 700, then where do I want to reset this back to? I want to reset it back where my orange one is. My orange one is at 70. But I don't want to just reset the x value. I want to reset the y value too. And I want to reset the y value to 310. So let's run that and see what happens. It should go in here and then look like it's coming out of from behind this one. So here it comes over. Yeah, it looks like it worked pretty good. Now the reason that it looks like the block is behind the portal rather than on top of it is only because of the draw order, right? I'm drawing my square and then I'm drawing my portals afterwards on top. I could just as easily draw my square after the portals and it'll look like it's over top of them. So it'll look like it's on top and then pops up on top of this one too. So that's kind of up to you however you want to do it. It's going in there and it's coming out of this one. Actually, that looked pretty good. Okay, so there you go. There's how you can do some looping with some animation.